Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Button Crew podcast. My name is Glen, and I am joined by my co-host, Simeon.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about Nintendo's fascination with the apocalypse. We have joked about this a lot in the past, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's high time that I think we actually examine all the instances of it and maybe discuss the similarities and how Nintendo likes to approach the apocalypse and maybe why they're fascinated with the apocalypse.
I'm really excited to jump into this very timely topic. I think we picked the perfect time to talk about this. Maybe too soon, but you know what? People been making all sorts of, uh, I was gonna say viral videos, but I don't think that would be in very good taste either. Matt Pat's been making several uh, virus-related videos on game theory, and so you know what? I think that will be okay.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal note, it seems like things are starting to stabilize, so maybe it's actually a good time to talk about this. So it's not too soon, but it's still timely.
I agree. Right where I am, we're just starting to let up on a lot of things this weekend, actually, as of this recording. So
Nice, glad to hear it. We've joked about this before. We're only going to talk about first party Nintendo games because the apocalypse is a very
oh,
popular setting for video games. You have
indeed.
everything from like the Fallout series to even argue things like Bioshock is kind of sort of post apocalyptic, so sort of more of a localized thing. So maybe that doesn't count, but
A
so let
fertile ground to be sure.
yes, fertile ground in the wasteland of the apocalypse.
Yes, in the radioactive fertile ground.
So let's get into some examples here. First up is Pikmin. Now, the Pikmin games,
Right.
at first you may not realize that's an apocalyptic setting, especially in the first game, and because it's very green. There's lots of life everywhere, and we're going to see that this is actually a fairly common thing for Nintendo. But if you pay attention to your surroundings, you kind of, especially in the first game, you notice like there were tin cans and stuff scattered around. So it's sort of like you're wandering around in maybe a nature preserve or something that just, or, well, not nature preserve, like a public park or something where people have left a little bit of litter and it just hasn't been picked up yet. In the sequel, you start finding a bunch of random treasure or random trash that you try to pass off as treasure because it's stuff that people aren't on Olimar's planet of what is it, Hakotate, I believe. They're not
Yep,
familiar with,
Octate.
and you start to realize it's a bunch of stuff like Duracell batteries and like stuff that we recognize, and you start to realize, oh, maybe this actually is Earth, and something happened to all the people there. And I think Miyamoto has actually confirmed that it takes place on Earth, that human beings have gone extinct.
Yeah, it makes you wonder just how long it's been because some of the stuff is, kind of intact. It hasn't completely eroded away, but you wonder, is Olimar completely alien, or have people just evolved to be that tiny to survive on a different environment? Or if the wildlife there obviously is not the same as our own. We don't have living, mushroom backed things or birds that grow out of the ground yet. So you kind of wonder. I think that's kind of a common theme: is how long has it been like this? How long has it taken to get like this?
Yeah, and one of the things that really with Pikmin that's kind of left open ended is, did humanity cause their own extinction, or has it just been so long that nature kind of ran its course and something came along and did us in? Or heck, maybe human beings still exist. Like you said, I never even considered this as a possibility. Maybe Olimar actually is like some sort of evolved human being, and they went to other planets, and because of the environment, they after a really long time, they just evolved to be very small. I find that personally a little bit unlikely because I don't think people would evolve to not breathe oxygen. That's kind of essential. It's like, how do you do that? It's sort of like in The Princess Bride with the I forget, like Wesley or whatever, the pirate. One of the main characters. He's talking about this one poison that's so potent that even the smallest amount can kill a man. And then when asked why he didn't die when he drank it, it's like, oh, I built up an immunity for it.
Yeah, it's like, well, how did you get it in the first place? How can you build up an immunity when you couldn't even have a little bit of it? That scene has always intrigued me, by the way. I know this is a side note and totally not video game related, but I mean, it's The Princess Bride. You gotta talk about it. That scene has always stuck in my mind from the very first time that I watched it. I think that was like the most memorable scene to me.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I need to watch that movie again.
Oh, me too. Okay, so, yeah. Pikmin is a big one, of course, especially being confirmed that it was Earth. But I think it's nice to see that it was like, not that it's good that the apocalypse happened and humanity is pretty much wiped out, but that it's like lush and green and not a wasteland. And I think that's not always going to happen, as we see throughout the rest of these. But
yeah, it's one of the reasons I
it's
suspect
a little bit
that
nicer.
Maybe the quote unquote apocalypse wasn't like nuclear warfare or something. Though then again, when you have walking mushrooms, it's maybe it was irradiated and everything got used to it. Like, I know in Chernobyl, like some of the animals there just have a much higher antioxidant or something like that. I don't remember what, but something that kind of helps them deal with the radiation. And so they've just adapted. Mm-hmm. And it's like this weird thing where this place is an irradiated wasteland where human beings really should not go because it's dangerous. And yet the animals there have, in a very short time, in like the 50 years since the actually it's probably been longer than that. It's 60. I don't know. I don't know when it happened.
Right.
I don't know history. That's why I have a brother who's a history major, just so I can ask him.
That's okay. This is an issue with us. Mm-hmm. Like, Scott doesn't know. Literally knows nothing about history. You could say the word Chernobyl and he probably has no clue what it is. You could say World War II and he hardly knows what that is. He probably doesn't know who was involved in World War II.
Yeah, World War II. They really jumped the shark with that one. I mean, I appreciate them trying to go bigger with that one, but they took out all the moral complexity from the first one, and I don't know why people like that one so much more than World War I. I mean, World War I was depressing. Don't get me wrong. Maybe they liked after World War I, they thought, it's really simple. There's the good guy, there's the bad guy, and that's it.
Yeah, that and that Ferdinand guy, he wasn't important in the least. Anyway, but what I'm saying is we have a serious issue in like understanding history, because if you don't understand history, which I was hoping,
I'm joking, of course. I'm actually. I tried to understand history pretty well. I'm just really bad with like dates and time span, and that like extends into real life. I have a very poor sense of time. I also can't keep rhythm. I think it's related.
That's good, because all we would have to go off of then is like what I've seen in documentaries, like, or at least what I saw in documentaries that I watched when I was like 12. So yeah. This is good.
I mean, I know a little bit about it. I know that was mostly ignoring safety protocols that caused it, and that it wasn't like a giant fireball. It was actually an explosion of steam, irradiated steam. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There's anyway, we're getting lost in the weeds here.
Yeah.
But
We gonna move on to the next one?
yeah, unless you have something else that you want to say about Pikmin.
I really didn't care for Pikmin. I played the first one time, I think, and even though I love um, Majora's Mask, I was way too afraid of the whole time element.
Oh yeah, Pikmin 1 was
So I
very stressful for me as a kid. I had a thing about time limits when I was younger. Um, so Pikmin 1, I understand if you don't like it. I would definitely recommend you go back and try Pikmin 2 or Pikmin 3 because they get rid of the well, Pikmin 3 has a time limit, but you can actually extend it through your own actions. And if you screw something up, you can rewind it.
okay.
So Pikmin 3 is, in my opinion, the best in the series. And if the rumors are true, as of this recording, it may be getting released sometime this summer or in the fall for the Switch. So that's a good time to pick it up and try it.
Ooh. I might have to do that. The gameplay mechanics are not what turned me off. It was the time limit, so I'll have to give that a shot.
Yeah. So let's see. So next up is Splatoon. Now, Splatoon is a lot like
Yes.
Pikmin, I would say, in terms of theme. So they reveal in their if you get like what do they call them, the sunken scrolls in the first game, they reveal that this is the world of Splatoon takes place on planet Earth, and humanity went extinct at some point. And then the Inklings evolved from squids, much like in that, what was that one documentary that I want to say it was Discovery Channel did way back in the early 2000s. It was like, it was about the world after humans go extinct, and it ended with squids evolving to be intelligent.
Are you serious? I have not heard about this.
Yeah, for the life of me, I can't remember what it was called, but I'm sure someone out there listening knows what I'm talking about. One of the things I found interesting is that mammals went extinct in that documentary. I was like, really?
Well, I mean, maybe they were seeing the global warming trend and saying, well, if we're all underwater, many of the mammals will have a difficult time. Besides Kevin Costner, of course, he will survive. Dennis Hopper, not so much. But yeah, this one I find interesting.
Well, Dennis Hopper's isn't a mammal. He's a highly evolved reptile. Isn't that?
Oh, yeah. That's. Oh my gosh. I'm intrigued by that movie. I'm afraid to see it from all that I've heard. I still haven't seen it yet. But I have one friend who is so thoroughly intrigued by it and says that if you don't consider it a Mario movie, it's a pretty good movie. And
it's very hard to separate the two, but I would agree with that. It's actually it's a pretty decent movie if you just try to separate. It's a terrible Mario movie. It's an okay schlocky science fiction action movie.
So it's like Rise of Skywalker.
I want to know. I haven't seen Rise of Skywalker, and I don't particularly care for Star Wars to begin with. I think I've mentioned that once on the podcast, and then Audacity crashed, and so it got cut from the episode.
Okay, so we got to be careful mentioning that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we won't get off on that tangent. Splatoon. Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with this one either, but it does fascinate me as far as the aesthetic and the story behind it. especially how, you see language, how they adopted certain elements of human culture. I don't think squids would necessarily come up with TV, but maybe they would.
Well, actually,
And
like,
maybe they,
you remember how they did the Splatfests, right?
right?
They had an old like fax machine that they dug up, and it would randomly start printing stuff out that it got from stray satellite signals that were glitching out.
Are you
Yeah, so
serious?
elements of their culture actually were influenced by humanity beforehand. Them digging up these old relics, and it's like, what the heck is this? This is cool.
You, see, they take the, at least hopefully they take the good stuff that we have and uh and run with it. I I think it's interesting. Like, I think it's cool that they even took squids. Like, how many video games do you know? Well, you probably know games with squids. Do you know any games like where squids are the main characters besides
Uh,
this?
let's see. There was, I think it came out after Splatoon, but there's like an indie game that has sort of a Game Boy aesthetic called Mr. Taco. That's taco with a K. It's the Japanese word for squid, I think.
Okay, yeah. I think it's a unique premise, but like a fertile ground.
Yeah, weren't
We
they
actually
originally going to be
did.
like rabbits or something? That was their first idea.
I think so. I think I do remember hearing something about that early on, is they had a different concept. But with squids, you may think, oh, they're just swimming things. But of course, this is a different cephalopod. But we did an episode. I can't remember which episode it was. Um, I want to say something like real life Pokemon, or Pokemon that I think it was something having to do with real life Pokemon, and we showed that clip of the Mimic Octopus. Have you seen these?
No. And now that I think of it, I think taco might actually be octopus. I may have been wrong about that, but continue.
Okay. Anyway, uh, Mimic octopi like see a different creature and basically like morph their body to not just look like but also act like other creatures. Like, you can see an octopus literally running like a bipedal thing on the ocean floor,
Okay,
and
I think
it's the
I've
most,
yeah, I think I've seen these things. Yeah, it's weird.
yeah. And just to see, like, okay, they took some element of that and said, okay, well, they're adaptable. They would survive an apocalypse. And if they did survive an apocalypse, this might be the kind of world that they adapt unto themselves.
Anyway, moving up is Nintendo's most recent Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild,
Yes.
and I'd say this is a much more traditional post-apocalyptic setting compared to the previous
Yes.
two, in that it's something horrible happened. It was violent. It was bloody. It destroyed pretty much civilization. Though there are little pockets left over, but like the previous ones, it's what I would call a verdant apocalypse, where except for a few places where there are pools of like Ganon's goop, which they call malice,
Mm-hmm.
the world is still fairly green.
Right. It wasn't a complete wipeout. It was mostly a destruction of the civilization as opposed to the nature.
Yeah, and so I guess that's a running theme is Nintendo doesn't like destroying trees in their apocalypses.
Yeah, and well, until we get to the second to last one on our list, that one's pretty severe. We'll get to that one though.
But
I think
yeah,
this is a really interesting way of doing it because we do have the destruction, but like even in the flashbacks, you see the infrastructure has severely suffered, but like the people are still around, and you don't see too much. Like you see that they're like oppressed and they're scared, but you don't see like, oh, it was like these booming metropolises, and now we're just in these little villages. They either have bounced back really quickly, or um, not too much has changed in day to day life.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I don't know. That's something that I felt like maybe the game could have done a little bit better because it's like it's only been 100 years. You'd think people would still be a little bit shaken by that, but at the same time, if there's anything I've learned, it's that people get used to stuff really quickly. So maybe it's more
True.
realistic that way.
I
And so
guess I guess so. I mean, if you look at our recent circumstances, obviously it's shaken the world quite a bit. We haven't dealt with something to this extent in our lifetime. And obviously there are hardships and difficulties even now bouncing back from it. But the way that we adapted our way of life to fit the situation, we got used to it pretty darn quick.
yeah, and the thing is, a lot of people did it voluntarily, which is uh, pretty cool to see. So, there's a lot of talk about, oh, we need to have these policies set in place and set in stone. It's like, no, most people, if you tell them, hey, please do this because it's safer, they'll go along with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, what was I saying? So, yeah, one of the interesting things, though, is I don't feel like I feel like only the Highlands really got the short end of the stick in this one because if you really look at it, like Gerudo Town, the Goron Town, the Zora Town, and the Rito Town, they all basically are effectively untouched outside of the Divine Beasts. But the Divine Beasts don't look like they've actually caused. They look like they're causing problems. They haven't actually destroyed anything yet. So
Right. Yeah, I see that. I see that as well. And the Hylians, they're a little bit scattered, whereas the rest of them, they're pretty well, put together. And yeah, I don't know. You don't see a lot of monsters like in their towns, whereas the with the Hylians, they're pretty well surrounded. They're kind of clumped off into different sections.
yeah, but another Zelda game that kind of has a post-apocalyptic feel uh, is the Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. And so what happens in that game, and I guess spoiler warnings for everything we're going to be talking about, but we find out that the world, yeah, a little late, I know,
Yeah.
but the world has been flooded, and Hyrule is technically it's underwater, but there's like a bubble, so the water's above it. It's just not in the water.
Right.
So does that count as being submerged or not? I don't know.
I I
Well,
would I would say, well,
I
oh
mean, if
man,
I hold a
that's
bucket
I
of
I would
water above
say
my head,
so.
I'm technically underwater, am I not?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like like if you emptied a snow globe of its water and then dunked it in water, like I would say it's submerged. Like even though the inside isn't completely inundated with water. I mean, you get that anyway with underwater caves, you get pockets of air. I mean, I guess maybe you don't, but I would say it's submerged.
Well, regardless of what's really going on there, the world has been flooded, and everybody lives on the mountaintops, which are now islands. And so civilization was basically destroyed. It's just, they're now living in Waterworld. I don't know which character was Kevin Costner, but
Probably Link. Well, no. Is there? I haven't played through Wind Waker. I've helped Scott on little parts of it. Is there? I'm sure there's an old grizzled mentor.
yeah, Orca from Outset.
Okay, yeah, that's probably Kevin Costner then.
Okay.
He's the main character in Waterworld, but I know that there are children in that movie. I haven't seen it, but I know a little bit about it anyway.
I haven't
enough
seen
to make
it either,
the reference.
so maybe we shouldn't make jokes about it.
Maybe not. People are gonna be like, "Oh, they're totally getting all of this wrong." Anyway, so I'm unfamiliar with Wind Waker.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Hyrule's underwater and the land has been flooded, but I am not sure if I know what led to that. I think we're
Okay,
past
so
spoiler territory.
yeah, what led to that, and this isn't actually a really a spoiler because it's mentioned. It's in like the intro info dump in the game. They have like this little intro cutscene where they're like reading off a scroll. But what happened was Ganon returned, and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, well the hero of time will fix it," and he never shows up. And they go, "Oh crud, goddesses help us," and so the three golden goddesses, which, my gosh, like the cosmology of the Legend of Zelda series is really confusing because I have no idea, like, because they added ever since they added Hylia in Skyward Sword, I have no idea who's in control of what, but
right.
the goddesses, the three golden goddesses, apparently haven't gone off to parts unknown or are still actively listening to prayer. And so they decide, okay, well, if Ganon's going to destroy Hyrule, we're just going to flood it. I don't know what they were really hoping to accomplish with that, but yeah, they flood Hyrule to contain Ganondorf or Ganon or whatever, and that's what happened.
Handy. Wow. Well, be careful what you pray for, I guess, is the moral of that story.
But yeah, so the Wind Waker takes place in a post-Diluvian world where the world is flooded and society has rebuilt, and it's one of those things where it's like it kind of shows again another verdant apocalypse, I guess, where there are still plants and trees and all of that. It's post-cataclysmic,
Right.
But the civilization, it's clearly been, like, by that point, it's been a very long time, and civilization's kind of adjusted.
Right. I think there's only the last. We have one more, and then the last two on our list are probably civilizations that haven't adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of Pikmin. We'll get to the last two. So, but before that, we have Custom Robo, which I find real. Now you've played through this game, right, Glenn?
Several times.
Several times, yes. This is a fantastic game. I don't think people talk about it enough.
And
it blew my mind.
It's criminal that we haven't had a new one in 15 years?
Yeah, because I think we got one soon after the DS came out, and then
yeah, and that one's really good too.
That.
It's very different in tone than the GameCube one.
Yep.
But I kind of chalked that up to the difference between what the GameCube was trying to accomplish and what the DS was trying to accomplish in terms of where Nintendo was at that point in its history.
I agree. I didn't make it all the way through the game, but I do remember it being different, a little bit different in mechanic, which it was all right, but for the most part kept the theme, and this game blew my mind. We have a whole
episode of the podcast devoted to that, so if you want to hear more about Custom Robo, go listen to that one after you're done with this.
So the story on this one is that there's this thing that Rahu
Mm-hmm.
destroyed the world, right?
Right.
And the people moved into this dome, which you start this game in this weird setting, and you kind of like, I don't know, you feel like the world is small. I think they intentionally made it to where you're like, well, I really like I can see everything. And then you get to the point in the game where it's like, what do you know about, the guy asks you, what do you know about the world?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, you say it's flat or it's round. And then if you say it's round, like, somebody comments like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Why would you even think that? Of course it's flat. Of course it's just this tiny little square of land that we know, but it's much more than that, and it's all been destroyed by this monster.
Yeah, and that one is of all the examples, that's probably the spookiest one. Because it
Yeah,
kind of crosses over into like Lovecraftian cosmic horror because they never explain what Rahu is or where it came from.
no, you know kind of what it can do, but it's a mystery because you're used to um, diving into these robots, and like there's and the people control the robots, but there's this thing that doesn't have a human controlling it, and having it run rogue, and having seeing it not just with, excuse me, seeing it have more than just robotic pieces, and seeing like organic matter on it. It brings a whole new dimension to what you think it's possible, and it grows too. It does it, and it's like a living thing, and so it is very different. Your attention is called to it, and it is really spooky when you find your way out into what is left of the world, and all that's left is a wasteland with a few like weird creepy carnival things. You're left to be like, oh man,
Yeah,
what
and
what
one of the
really
things that
happened
always kind of
here?
creeped me out was the tunnel leading up to it. So you're as
Hmm.
you're leaving the dome, there's this tunnel that goes through, and it has like a sort of a space background,
Yeah.
and then you get to this wasteland. There are these huge ravines that just go on for what seems like ever. And it's like, okay, what? And maybe this is just a kid who wasn't really thinking in terms of, oh, this is just a special effect. But I had to stop and think and go, okay, what's the extent of the damage here? Is the planet Earth still a sphere?
Yeah, no, I thought that too. I was like, I didn't think it was. I thought it was like broken apart.
Yeah, so it when especially when you're a kid, that's pretty unnerving. Um,
Yeah, agreed. And who would have thought? I mean, I know that Nintendo has like creepy stuff, especially when it comes to like Earthbound and stuff, but they don't do it too often, especially without some sort of lighthearted thing to bring it up. And I guess that there's like jokes and stuff in it, and parts of it are colorful, but they went like full on dark for this,
mm,
and that's not common.
yeah. Anyway, so moving on, we're going to be talking about Kirby. Yay! So in Kirby
Yay!
64, one of the planets you go to is a planet called Shiver Star. It's a frozen over icy. I don't know. I'm not sure it's fair to call it a wasteland because we are still talking Kirby here, but
Right.
it's just a big ball of ice and snow. But if you pay really close attention on the map screen, you notice that you can actually see the continents, North America and Africa and all of that, uh, on the surface of the planet. And realize, oh my gosh, this is a frozen Earth. That's, and there's no signs of human life anywhere on the planet.
Not only anywhere on the planet, but if I'm not mistaken, I don't think anywhere in Kirby's like lore, I can't remember a single human
Well, there is
being
the
ever
painter
included.
girl, Adeline.
That's true. That is
So,
true. I never thought of that.
but it
Is she
does,
like the last human?
I don't know. I mean, in a colorful, cartoony world like Kirby, it's sometimes hard to tell if someone's like a human or if they're like supposed to be some sort of elf or something.
Right, that's true.
So I presume Adeline's human. I don't know. Um, anyway, where was I? So, and you start out just running through snowy fields, but you also like at one point it looks like you're running through a mall and then like a factory, and it ends with you fighting this robot in what I presume is a military base. So it raises some questions, and especially since some of the stuff you see in the factory is really weird.
Yeah, don't they have like preserved stuff in the factory?
Yeah, they have creatures like floating around in tanks in the background. And it raises a lot of questions also in terms of how big Kirby is, because I know from like the Smash Brothers series, Kirby's officially like supposed to be 8 inches tall, I think.
Really?
Yeah, but he seems to be the same size as the. He doesn't look that out of place in the mall. It's not like you're playing Chibi Robo or anything. But then
Right.
when you get to the factory, you see like a cat, and the cat's much bigger than Kirby, and be like, okay, if Kirby were 8 inches tall, that'd be about to proportion, and maybe the assembly line stuff here is actually the kind of small because that's how machines often are.
I propose a timeline here.
Okay.
So the world, humans either go extinct or leave the world, and uh, you know, animals kind of like evolve and stuff, and you have the weird creatures that you see in Pikmin, and then all Mars people come in and inhabit the world and create the malls and stuff that you see that Kirby goes through initially, and then that way you see the both sizes, I don't know, taken care of so that you can see
Considering
like
how
that
convoluted Kirby lore has actually gotten here in like the last 10 years, that may be a possibility. Like,
I don't know. I just spitballing, but maybe, who knows.
no, seriously, like go try to look up Kirby lore at some point. Like they've been sneaking a lot of stuff and a lot of subtext in the Kirby games here of late.
Really, I will have to check that out. That's one series that I really haven't delved into as far as storyline goes. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the commonalities between these games.
Yeah, and one we've already mentioned before is that they don't typically follow like the traditional Fallout style apocalypse where the world is bombed out. With the one exception we mentioned, the world is bombed out and everything is destroyed and all of that. And it typically doesn't appear to be the result of like necessarily even war or violent conflict, which is kind of where our, at least here in the West, where our general idea of post-apocalyptic fiction comes from.
I wonder how much of that, and this is getting a little too real for a video game podcast, but I wonder how much of that is a historical and cultural thing for them, because nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan, and having that as a theme in a game might not be something that they would necessarily want to do right away. I mean, you have something like Godzilla, that kind of it it pictures that, but not exactly in the same sense, and not a whole a whole apocalypse. But I
Yeah,
wonder
and
how much of that is
that's definitely a good point. Is that as I understand it, Japan is a little bit sensitive about that topic for obvious
sure.
reasons. Um, I think also post-apocalyptic fiction typically got its roots in like the Cold War, when the idea of the world being destroyed by war seemed very real, because you had World War One, then you had its, in my opinion, lackluster sequel, and it's like, well, what do you do after that? You blow up the planet.
Right. Right. Well, we they had that weapons. The weapons started to stockpile, and mutually assured destruction was thrown around and seen as a possibility, a real possibility. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised to see this sort of thing take off, but it is nice to see um, that it can be handled in a way that isn't all gloom and doom, because I feel like that has been, especially in other mediums, how it's been taken is, yes, people adapt, but society never really adapted, or it maladapted. We have stuff like the Hunger Games, or um, that Hunger Games ripoff that I am blanking on right now, where they're
Divergent, is that
broke.
what you're talking about?
Yes, the Divergent series. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember talking to someone who really liked it, and they explained it to me. And this is the first time I'd ever heard about Divergent, and I just heard that, and it's like, that sounds like the most hackneyed, cliched.
yeah, and I think that's because we've gotten used to apocalypse means, um, if there's any adaptation, it's maladaptation, and it's all bad.
Yeah,
And it's like,
dystopian
well,
and all
it's,
of that. Really, it sounds more like
yeah,
dystopian
dystopian.
fiction that uses a cataclysmic event or whatever um, as a framing device, as a setup, a literary tool. That's the word.
Right, sure. It's nice to see Nintendo with their genius taking a different route with that, with these verdant apocalypses.
Yeah, and I mean, if I were to do a story in a post-apocalyptic setting, I probably would do something like that as well. Um,
Hmm.
so it appeals to my sensibilities on top of just being something different and refreshing. But that brings us to the second issue, is that typically the apocalypse is not the like front and center, and it, like, something like
Right.
Metro 20, what's it, I don't know, I haven't played it, but the Metro
Hmm.
series or Fallout, the apocalypse is front and center. It's part of the
Right.
it's one of the main attractions. It's like, okay, you're in a
It's
world,
unavoidable.
apocalyptic world, excuse me. It's gritty, it's dark, people are desperate, so on and so forth. Here it's more like, oh, by the way, did you know this is planet Earth? What?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't really see it until it hits you in the face.
I
With
mean,
those few
mhm.
few exceptions.
Yeah, with like the Legend of Zelda, which is, again, it's a destructive apocalypse, but it's a verdant one. Where like the people in particular were targeted, which I find interesting.
Right.
Um, so that's playing with the trope a little bit, but yeah, Pikmin, Splatoon, heck, even Kirby 64, and Pokemon, if we count it.
Right.
That's all just background fluff. That's all either implied or stated outside of the game by the creators or whatever. So it's really interesting seeing how they like to incorporate this element, without it actually being a major part of the game itself. You can enjoy the game in its entirety without knowing that.
Right. I also think that maybe there are other companies that do this, but I think it points to just how beloved, or endearing, I should say, Nintendo's games are, and how beloved they are by people, that they could slip in details like this, and that they would be noticed by so many people enough to talk about them. Because I don't see other there. It's either upfront or not included or not noticed.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange decision. So let's examine it. Why does Nintendo have a fascination with the apocalypse, and especially since they're not making it like a major plot detail in most instances? So first and foremost, and this doesn't really, because Nintendo doesn't really make this a major part of it. This isn't really a major contributing factor, but it is something that I guess I should mention, just for the sake of being thorough. And it's that the apocalypse is what I would call an adventure-friendly setting. Because, in the modern day, you can walk out your front door and be pretty confident that nothing interesting is going to happen to you.
Yes.
Present circumstances, even in the present circumstances, like I go outside and most people, like you see people walking around all the time. It's not that
right.
I don't know. It's one of the benefits of living in Oklahoma is that stuff just doesn't happen here. As I've always joked about, it's like they're never going to make a Fallout game set in Oklahoma because the Chinese probably forgot to bomb Oklahoma in the Fallout series.
Yes. Oh, I agree with you on this one, that it is adventure friendly, and it's the sort of thing that would intrigue. I shouldn't say intrigue me, but something that I have been vocal about, especially with the release of this most recent Animal Crossing game, and I have no problem with people playing Animal Crossing, knock yourselves out, but I have no interest in something like that because it's too familiar to where when I play video games, which is more and more rare now, unfortunately,
I feel that.
I want to. I'm glad I'm not alone. I want to experience something that I am not going to experience in real life for sure. Like when I sit down and play a game, I want it to maybe emotionally hit home if there's some sort of emotional thing. But like if I can do whatever it is that it is I'm attempting to do in the video game, like pay off my mortgage or just like go around and talk to people and like The Sims or whatever, like that doesn't grab me. If there's an apocalypse and the world has vastly changed and the environment is different and the things that I'm doing are more than just going out to eat, that is going to grab me. At least that's going to be a big pull. So making something that's not safe, even if it is verdant and it's pleasant, if it's not safe and it's different, then it's going to grab me.
Yeah. Anyway, but something you mentioned was intrigue, and I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons that Nintendo does this is that it's easy to make a fantasy world and just have it completely disconnected from our world, but when you somehow link them together, but you don't fully explain how you got there, so it's like, okay, this is our world, but all the people are gone. Well, how'd that happen? That immediately hooks people, and they go, okay, I'm interested in this now because there are questions here that I'm, they're never going to answer it. They don't have to. I kind of prefer if they didn't in a lot of cases, but it does.
Have you?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, did you see Lost when it was coming out, or have you seen Lost at all?
No.
So J.J. Abrams, who also did the Star Wars, two of the more recent Star Wars movies, he has a storytelling philosophy that you kind of just touched on, which is the mystery box philosophy. Is he bombards the audience with just mystery boxes to where, as opposed to setting a basically he makes you ask questions like why or how. Like if you even just flippantly drop in, oh, this is actually post-apocalyptic, um, planet Earth, you instantly start to ask how or why, and even if it is a background detail, you it draws you in and hooks you, and you start looking for other clues or consistencies with that to try and find out what exactly it is that's going on.
Hmm. So yeah, it is something because, and also it makes it kind of personal as well because we are humans, and so if we find out that like in the world of Pikmin that humans are gone, then
Right.
it's sort of like, well, I'm a human. What So we
Yeah,
kind of project our current world onto that as well, and sort of gets us to look around and start asking questions as well. I don't know. I'm making it sound like it's a
absolutely.
huge political statement or something. I don't really think it is, but
No, I totally get what you're saying though. It is that intrigue, and it makes you ask the questions because it is like, well, what is it that we did? What is it something that we're doing now? I think that we I think that it's meant to ask those questions. However far deep you go in, I think it is meant to make you stop and think, and that we should.
hmm. Another thing is going back to sort of the projecting yourself onto it is emotional impact. I don't know about you, but when
Hmm.
I saw the Wasteland and Custom Robo, that was like getting slapped in the face.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it is a slap in the face, and like a real sense of dread. Like there are few games that I've played that gave me a real sense of dread. Um, One of those was Custom Robo. The other one was Metroid Prime, the Phazon Mines. Really, and the crashed space station. Um, Both of those gave me a real sense of dread. And Custom Robo, however, excuse me, for however you know nice it looks on the outside, when it takes that turn, it really like gripped me emotionally, giving me a sense of dread and a sense of urgency. Um, Absolutely.
Yeah, so um, it's a good way to have an emotional impact on people, and you can have it be a big reveal. You can have it just be sort of that, like in Kirby, that sudden, uneasy realization that sort of makes you go back through the environments, double checking everything, and going, "Oh yeah, this does look familiar." So it definitely it can be very emotionally resonant. And I
Hmm.
think lastly, and we touched on this a little bit previously, but I think Japanese culture just this like the way Nintendo does apocalypses in particular, Japanese culture just kind of has this fascination if you like go through video games and anime and stuff with
Hmm.
cataclysmic events that sort of cause social upheaval. There's like anime examples, Darker Than Black. Cowboy Bebop has something like that where the like at one point they accidentally in the show's history they accidentally blow up the moons. I think Akira. I've never seen Akira, but I think it
I
has stuff
think
to that extent.
I think if I'm not mistaken, Attack on Titan is also like that.
Oh yeah, Attack on Titan. That's a
Um,
good example.
yeah, I definitely see that, and I'm pretty sure that you're right about Akira or Akira or however that's pronounced. I'm pretty sure that's
I think
also
I think technically it's
dystopian
something along the
at
lines
least.
of Akira or something, but
Oh
I don't
yeah,
speak.
Akira. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't speak Japanese. But yeah, and if you look at Japanese history, it actually makes a lot of sense. They were isolationists for a really long time. So like up
mm,
until the 19th century, they were basically doing the samurai uh, thing.
feudal
So they
system.
were, yeah, feudalism. So there was like a period for like 300 or 400 years where their society just didn't really technologically advance, and then suddenly you
Hmm.
have Commodore Perry show up and open up trade with them using gunboat diplomacy, and they suddenly go, "Oh, hey, society has really changed. We should play catch up." So rapid modernization that completely upends the social order of things.
Oh yeah,
Um, and then in World War II, the big finale of that was they got nuked, not once but
yeah.
twice. So
Right.
and so Japan is a culture that I think they really have this much more than any other modern industrialized culture, this kind of understanding of what it's like to have everything change just very quickly, and that's just you can see it all over Japanese media where they have like this combination of like really traditional stuff next to hyper modern stuff. So
Right. Yeah, I was going to make that comment that that's seems to be a constant struggle. Not that it's not a constant or a common theme in what we have with the traditional versus the modern. I think I think for them it's more of a conflict. I think for us, basically, it's almost always played for comedy. That, oh, here's this old codger that doesn't understand the current trends or
well,
the
I mean, it
current
can be played for
mores.
drama. I remember reading online someone criticizing Pixar, and he said, after a certain point, if you look at what the plot structure of every Pixar movie is, it's ultimately the traditional way versus a newer way. It's old versus new.
Really, wow, I never made that connection. I'm gonna have to go back and think through
Yeah, I think
those.
it might have been
Yeah.
like Finding Nemo that was where that started, but it's one of those things
Mm.
where I go back and it's like, yeah, I kind of can't unsee that. Though even then, I guess Toy Story and Toy Story 2 had elements of that. Um,
Oh, sure, absolutely, especially Toy Story 2.
Yeah, but then again, it's one of those things where maybe that's just such a very general theme that it's sort of like the concept of the monomyth. It's like it's just so flexible; you can kind of fit it to everything. Is even if it's um, after a point, it kind of stops being useful because of that.
Right. Right. Right.
So I
Well,
don't know,
like all tropes.
but yeah. So anything else you have to say about that, or
I don't think so. I think we pretty well covered that.
all right? Well, and now for the fun part. What's your favorite apocalypse?
My favorite apocalypse is hmm, probably I'm gonna go with Custom Robo because it was not only an integral part of the story, but it was emotionally gripping and like there are a lot of games that you know I could think about the story or whatever, but that one really stuck with me, especially because of those apocalyptic themes, and it's I don't know. There's just a lot of cool things about that, a lot of unique things about Custom Robo and the way they handled the apocalypse that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that. Custom Robo's my favorite just because it's the most. It definitely was one of the most shocking moments I've ever experienced, and part of that's probably because I was a kid, but one of the most shocking moments I've ever experienced in a video game, and
Yeah.
I'd say if I had to choose a runner-up, probably Pikmin.
Sure.
Yeah, and that probably because, like we said, it's so laid back. Like it isn't some sort of humans doomed. We have no idea. Honestly, I kind of assumed that it is just something like some natural disaster or I don't know, perhaps even a virus. To keep it topical, just came out and it just weakened the human race, and they eventually just sort of slowly got phased out. Like it gives me the impression that I don't know. I guess it's just that it's so open to interpretation that it doesn't feel threatening in a weird way.
Yeah. Or preachy.
Yeah, or preachy. But anyway, so I think we basically said everything that we can on Nintendo and its strange relationship to the apocalypse. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just hope that everybody who has been affected by this virus, that you're doing well physically, emotionally, whether you've been impacted yourself or a family member or somebody close to you has been struck with this virus. I just hope that you have hope. We are people that adapt, and things will go back to some sort of new normal very soon. And the world is not over yet.
Yes, it's good to know that unless something changes for the worse, that we ourselves are not in an actual apocalypse.
Yes,
that's
yes.
That's something you can say every day. Even if you hate your job or whatever, it's like, well, at least I'm not living in the apocalypse. So,
yes.
Sometimes I have to wonder if some people would actually prefer that.
I when you said that, I had this image of I'm not sure. I'm sure you've seen the comic of, or the gif of the dog in the burning house drinking his coffee, saying "This is fine." Yes.
But anyway, so thank you for listening to another episode of the Two Button Crew podcast. My name is Glenn, and
this is Simeon.
Once again, thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.